Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, we always love to hear what you have to say, but this time of year we are especially interested in the weather. So what's the forecast look like?
Well, Troy, you're exactly right. We're moving into June. Now is the time when the crops start to use some water, and it'll increase only as we go through the month of June and into July. So the weather becomes very critical at this standpoint. In this last week, of course, we've seen the cooler weather during the Memorial Day weekend with some off and on again rain through central and western Nebraska. A lot lighter precipitation amounts, unfortunately, in eastern Nebraska, and particularly in extreme northeastern Nebraska, where we've had some little small pockets of exceptionally dry conditions. The weather looks a little bit more promising as we get out into the middle of the month, but if you're enjoying summer temperatures, which we haven't seen a lot of during the last 10 days, this is the type of forecast you really want to pay attention to. So we go to the upper air models. The first thing I'll draw your attention to is that we've got this Big Bridge over top of the eastern two-thirds of the country with a trough out the Pacific Northwest and a little persistence of an upper air low hanging around southern Texas. At the surface, we have a low pressure system in eastern Montana, high pressure over the central Rockies, just an absence of precipitation expected in the central plains as most of the moisture will be concentrated along the Gulf Coast. As we go into tomorrow, some of that energy from that trough tries to slip across the northern plains, pushes the air mass a little bit farther to the south, but for here in the central portion of the country, looks like sunny skies will be in store, maybe an isolated thunderstorm during the heart of the day, but we're still going to be looking at temperatures in the upper 80s to the low to mid 90s across the southern part of the state. By Monday, that trough doesn't move a lot, tries to make some energy up into the northern plains, shoots out a couple pieces of low pressure over northern Wyoming and southwestern South Dakota, at the same time pushing a weak front through the state. So we may see some thunderstorm develop along that front, although it doesn't look to be widespread. By the time we get to Tuesday, that ridge starts to reestablish, pushing back up toward the north. That digs that trough out to the west a little bit farther south. But really all we're going to start to do is start to see moisture really evecting toward the north, getting very humid across the central plains. But again, most of the precipitation stays to our south. By the time we get to the middle of next week, though, that trough looks like it wants to dig a little bit farther toward the south. That's really going to pump up the moisture into our region. So it's going to get very sticky, very humid as we see temperatures in the upper 80s to low 90s. And of course, we start to see some of those air mass thunderstorms developing during the peak heating of the daytime. As we go into Thursday, that trough itself starts to break down and slightly shoots some energy up into eastern Montana. So we do expect to see some precipitation across the northern Rockies and in the southern portions of Canada. But here in the central plains, most of the moisture will be basically from the Gulf streaming northward. So it's just basically heating of the day. On Friday, once again, that ridge tries to build back in. That trough remains persistent in the west. Another piece of energy shoots out of that trough, maybe generating some thunderstorm activity across extreme northern plains, more isolated across the central United States. If we look out a little farther into the future with this drier forecast, at least starting to the month of June, CPC issued their month of June forecast for temperature and precipitation. And before we get to that, we do see above normal temperatures for next Thursday through the following Tuesday, so you kind of get in store what I'm going to get at. Below normal across the southern portions of the plains region where we have that persistent upper air low that's basically parked over southern Texas. In terms of precipitation, with that ridge out west, still continuing that into the end of next week, there are some signs that maybe this will break down as we get into the mid-month period. We'll wait and see. But as we go even further into the future, and this takes us for the full entire month of June, CPC is indicating the core of the high pressure over the western United States mostly warm above normal temperature across the northern plains, and a lot of that due to the surface drying from the drought, persistent cooling to our south. And in terms of precipitation, with that dryness over the northern Rockies the first 10 days of the month, it looks like they want to spread that out into the western portions of the state. Again, most of the persistence with this above normal moisture to our south is due to the upper air low.